For over 1,000 years, the Roman Empire governed tens of millions of people across 3 continents, erected structures that still stand, and engineered systems of law, language, and infrastructure that underpin the modern world. We remember Rome for its legions, its senators, its emperors. But the civilization that reshaped Western history did not begin in the forum or the battlefield. It began in the home. Long before the Colosseum held its first spectacle, and in Roman families were solving the same problems we face in our kitchens, bathrooms, and living rooms today. How to stay warm, how to keep food from spoiling, how to clean without industrial chemicals, how to make a house feel like more than just 4 walls. And what they discovered, through centuries of observation, trial, and quiet ingenuity, was a domestic science so effective that many of their solutions have never been improved upon. Some of them sit in your cupboard right now. You just don't know their story. To understand why Roman domestic innovations were so advanced, we must first understand how Romans thought about the home itself. The domus, the traditional Roman house, was not merely a shelter. It was a carefully designed system, a machine for living that integrated architecture, chemistry, agriculture, and hydraulic engineering into a single structure. Every room had a purpose. Every surface had a function. At the heart of this system was a principle that modern sustainability advocates would recognize immediately. Use what you have, waste nothing, and let nature do the heavy lifting wherever possible. Roman households operated within an economy of scarcity that rewarded cleverness over consumption. Water was precious, fuel was expensive, space in the growing city was limited. These constraints did not produce deprivation, they produced innovation. By the 2nd century AD, Rome had grown into a metropolis of over 1 million people, the largest city the Western world would see for another 17 centuries. Feeding, heating, cleaning, and organizing that population required solutions that worked not just for the wealthy in their sprawling villas, but for ordinary families packed into multi-story insulae, apartment blocks that rose 5, 6, sometimes 7 stories above the narrow streets. The Romans who lived in those buildings could not afford to waste a single drop of olive oil, a single bucket of rainwater, or a single hour of daylight. This pressure, this constant negotiation between ambition and limitation, produced a toolkit of domestic techniques that was remarkably sophisticated. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder, Columella, and Cato the Elder documented hundreds of household practices in exhaustive detail, from how to preserve fruit to how to drive away insects. From how to treat a stained tunic to how to keep a cellar cool in August. These were not folk remedies passed along by superstition. They were tested, refined, and recorded by a civilization that treated practical knowledge with the same seriousness it gave to military strategy. And buried within that knowledge were solutions so elegant, so fundamentally sound, that they would survive the fall of the empire, the chaos of the Middle Ages, and the rise of industrial chemistry, only to be rediscovered, repackaged, and sold back to us in the 21st century under new names. The turning point was not a single invention. It was a shift in perspective. Sometime around the 3rd century BC, as Rome transitioned from a regional power to the dominant force in the Mediterranean, the Roman approach to the household crossed a threshold. Domestic knowledge stopped being passed down solely through oral tradition and started being systematized, written, debated, and optimized. Cato the Elder, a statesman who commanded armies and shaped policy, spent the final years of his life writing De Agricultura, a manual on farming and household management. It was not beneath him. In Roman culture, managing a household well was a civic virtue, not a domestic chore. The paterfamilias who kept his home efficient, his stores full, and his family healthy was performing an act of Roman duty. But the key innovation was not ideological. It was methodological. The Romans began to approach domestic problems the way they approached engineering problems, through observation, measurement, and iterative improvement. They tested which mixtures cleaned marble without scratching it. They experimented with which herbs repelled which insects. They measured how deep a cellar needed to be to maintain a constant temperature. They calculated the precise angle of a roof slope to maximize rainwater collection. The household became a laboratory, and the results would last for millennia. The most visible feature of a Roman domus was not its columns or its mosaics. It was the compluvium, a rectangular opening in the roof that served a purpose so practical it bordered on poetic. Rain fell through the compluvium into the impluvium, a shallow basin in the floor of the atrium below. From there, the water flowed through terracotta pipes into an underground cistern called a cisterna, where it was filtered through layers of sand and gravel and stored for months. This was not primitive. This was a gravity-fed, naturally filtered water collection system that required no moving parts, no external energy, and no maintenance beyond occasional cleaning. A well-designed impluvium could capture thousands of liters of water per year, enough to supply a household's cooking, cleaning, and garden irrigation needs through the dry Mediterranean summer. The principle is identical to the rainwater harvesting systems now being installed in eco-homes across Europe and North America, often at considerable expense. The Romans simply built it into the architecture from the start. Section 2. Heat from below. The hypocaust. Roman winters, particularly in the northern provinces, Britain, Gaul, Germania, were brutal. The solution was the hypocaustum, one of the most elegant heating systems ever devised. A furnace at one end of the building pushed hot air through a network of channels beneath a raised floor, supported by stacks of brick pillars called pilae. The heat radiated upward through the stone floor, warming the room evenly from below. Exhaust gases traveled up through hollow tiles, tubuli, built into the walls, heating them as well before exiting through vents in the roof. The result was radiant floor heating, the same principle used in modern underfloor heating systems, which are now marketed as a premium feature in luxury homes. The Romans installed them in bathhouses, villas, and even military barracks across the empire. Remains of hypocaust systems have been found from Hadrian's Wall to the deserts of North Africa. The system was so effective that some Roman baths required thick-soled sandals to walk on the heated floors. The air temperature in a well-maintained caldarium could reach over 40 degrees Celsius. Acetum, vinegar, was the Roman household's universal solvent. They used it to clean surfaces, descale pipes, treat wounds, preserve food, and purify drinking water. Roman soldiers carried a diluted vinegar drink called posca as their standard field beverage, not because they enjoyed the taste, but because the acetic acid killed waterborne pathogens and prevented dysentery on long campaigns. At home, vinegar was mixed with water to scrub kitchen surfaces, remove lime deposits from terracotta vessels, and wipe down marble without the abrasive damage that sand or pumice could cause. Pliny the Elder documented dozens of vinegar-based cleaning and medical applications in his Naturalis Historia, treating the substance with a respect that bordered on reverence. Today, white vinegar is the cornerstone of the natural cleaning movement. It's the acetic acid concentration in a modern bottle of cleaning vinegar, typically 5 to 8%, is virtually identical to what a Roman housewife would have produced from her own wine stores. The chemistry has not changed. We simply forgot it for a few centuries, and then rediscovered it. If vinegar was the Roman cleaning agent, olive oil was everything else. Romans used it to cook, to moisturize skin, to fuel lamps, to lubricate door hinges, to condition leather, to polish wood, and to waterproof fabric. A single amphora of good olive oil served the functions that modern households distribute across a dozen specialized products. For skincare, Roman women applied olive oil directly to the face and body, often mixed with fine sand or pumice as an exfoliant, then scraped it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. The oil dissolved dirt and dead skin cells while leaving behind a protective, moisturizing layer. This is the exact mechanism behind modern oil cleansing methods, which have surged in popularity as consumers seek alternatives to synthetic detergents. For cooking, olive oil was not merely a preference, it was a preservation medium. Vegetables, cheese, and even meat submerged in olive oil could last for months without refrigeration, as the oil created an anaerobic seal that prevented bacterial growth. Roman pantries, the celi penuariae, were lined with amphorae of oil-preserved foods, a technique still practiced across the Mediterranean today. Perhaps no Roman ingredient has been more misunderstood than garum, a fermented fish sauce produced by layering fish intestines, blood, and flesh with salt in stone vats, then leaving the mixture to break down under the Mediterranean sun for weeks or months. The liquid that floated to the top was strained, bottled, and sold across the empire at prices that rivaled fine wine. To modern sensibilities, the production method sounds revolting, but the result was pure umami, a concentrated savory flavor that Romans added to virtually everything: stews, roasted meats, vegetables, even desserts. Apicius, the most famous Roman cookbook author, called for garum in the majority of his recipes. It was the Roman equivalent of soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, and MSG combined into a single condiment. The chemistry is identical to the fish sauces still produced across Southeast Asia: Thai Nam Pla, Vietnamese Nuoc Mam, Korean Jeot Gal. The fermentation process breaks down proteins into glutamates, the same compounds that give Parmesan cheese, ripe tomatoes, and soy sauce their depth of flavor. Rome fell, but the science of umami did not. It simply migrated eastward. Every Roman household of any means maintained a hortus, a kitchen garden, and its contents were chosen with surgical precision. Rosemary was planted near doorways not for decoration, but because its volatile oils repelled flies and mosquitoes. Lavender was dried and placed among stored textiles to deter moths. Bay laurel was scattered in grain stores to keep weevils away. Pennyroyal was crushed and rubbed onto skin as an insect repellent. These were not guesses. Roman agricultural writers cataloged which plants repelled which pests, with a specificity that modern entomologists have largely confirmed. A. Columella's De Re Rustica contains instructions for pest management that read like an organic gardening manual written last year. The same herbs doubled as a medicine cabinet. Chamomile was brewed for digestive complaints. Fennel was chewed to freshen breath and settle the stomach. Thyme was burned in sick rooms because, as we now know, its essential oil, thymol, has genuine antiseptic properties. The Romans did not understand the biochemistry. They understood the results. And the results were consistent enough to be recorded, replicated, and trusted across generations. This is the solution that modern sensibilities find most difficult to accept, but it was arguably the most scientifically advanced of all Roman domestic practices. Roman launderers, the foulones, collected urine in public pots placed on street corners across the city. The urine was aged in vats until the urea decomposed into ammonia, and that ammonia was used to clean, degrease, and whiten woolen garments. The process worked because ammonia is a powerful alkaline cleaning agent that breaks down oils and organic stains without damaging natural fibers. It is the same active compound found in modern household cleaners today. Emperor Vespasian famously taxed the urine trade in the 1st century AD, and when his son Titus complained about the source of the revenue, Vespasian held up a gold coin and replied, "Pecunia non olet," money does not smell. The foulones were not performing folk magic. They were running an industrial chemical process that would not be fundamentally improved upon until the synthesis of artificial ammonia in the early 20th century. In the sweltering summers of Italy and North Africa, Romans controlled indoor temperature without a single mechanical device. Their methods were architectural. Thick stone walls, often a meter deep, absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly at night, at moderating temperature swings. Courtyards and peristyles created shaded outdoor spaces where air could circulate freely. Fountains and shallow pools added evaporative cooling to atriums. Windows were positioned to catch prevailing breezes and angled to block direct sunlight during the hottest hours. The underground rooms, the cryptoportici, found beneath many Roman villas maintained temperatures of 15 to 18 degrees Celsius year-round, regardless of the weather above. Romans used them as cool retreats during summer and as storage spaces where perishable goods lasted significantly longer. Modern passive house design uses identical principles: thermal mass, natural ventilation, strategic shading, and evaporative cooling. The difference is that the Romans arrived at these solutions through 1,000 years of building in hot climates. We arrived at them through computer modeling. The conclusions are the same. Before mechanical refrigeration, and every household faced the same existential question: how do you keep food from killing you? The Romans answered with a systematic arsenal of preservation techniques, each matched to a specific food type. Meat and fish were salted and dried, or smoked over specific woods. Oak for durability, apple for flavor. Fruits were preserved in honey, which is a natural antimicrobial agent due to its low water activity and slight acidity. Vegetables were pickled in vinegar or submerged in brine. Cato the Elder provided precise salt-to-meat ratios in his writings, not approximations, but measured quantities designed to achieve specific curing results. Roman garum factories operated on an industrial scale, producing thousands of amphorae of preserved fish product per season. These are not historical curiosities. Salt curing, smoking, honey preservation, and pickling are the foundations of charcuterie, fermentation culture, and artisanal food production worldwide. The Roman ratios have been tested and confirmed by modern food science. They were, in essence, already correct. The Romans discovered early that wood ash mixed with water produced lye, a powerful alkaline solution that cut through grease and grime far more effectively than water alone. When combined with animal fat, this lye produced a crude but functional soap. Pliny the Elder credited the Gauls and Germanic tribes with refining the process. But Roman households adopted it widely for both personal hygiene and household cleaning. Ash-based lye was also used to clean cooking vessels, to strip old finishes from wooden furniture, and to treat textiles before dyeing. The chemical reaction, saponification, is the same process used in artisanal soap making today. Modern cold-process soap makers follow a procedure that a Roman craftsman would recognize immediately. Combine a fat with an alkali, control the temperature, cure the result. The entire modern soap industry, from the most luxurious French Savon de Marseille to the simplest bar of lye soap, traces its chemistry directly back to this Roman-era discovery. When Rome fell, its legions dissolved, its senate scattered, and its provinces fragmented into kingdoms that would war with each other for centuries. But something quieter survived. In farmhouses across the former empire, families continued to harvest rainwater, to preserve meat in salt, to clean with vinegar, and to grow rosemary by the door. The knowledge was too practical to forget, too embedded in daily life to be erased by political collapse. The great irony is that the Industrial Revolution, which gave us synthetic detergents, mechanical refrigeration, and central heating, did not so much replace Roman domestic science as obscure it. For 2 centuries we convinced ourselves that factory-produced solutions were inherently superior to ancient ones. We replaced vinegar with chemical sprays. We replaced herb gardens with pesticide strips. We replaced olive oil with petroleum-based moisturizers. We replaced passive cooling with air conditioning units that consume more electricity than some Roman cities produced in a year. And now, in the early decades of the 21st century, we are slowly circling back. The natural cleaning movement, the revival of fermentation, the rise of passive house design, the obsession with artisanal preservation. These are not new discoveries. They are rediscoveries. We are relearning what Roman households knew 2,000 years ago, that the most durable solutions are often the simplest ones, built not on technological complexity, but on a patient understanding of how materials, heat, water, and living things actually behave. The Romans did not have our technology, but they had something that technology alone cannot provide: centuries of accumulated observation, tested against the unforgiving reality of daily life, then refined until only what truly worked remained. The next time you pour vinegar into a spray bottle, or drizzle olive oil across a salad, or step onto a heated floor on a cold morning, you are not performing a modern act. You are completing a gesture that began in a Roman kitchen, in a Roman atrium, on a Roman winter morning 2 millennia ago. The empire is gone, the roads are buried, but the household endures, and with it, the quiet genius of people who solved our problems long before we thought to ask the question.